For 30 years in Paris, I had been dreaming about Peking without knowing it. In my imagination, I could still see an illustration from a book I had looked at in my childhood, without knowing exactly what it referred to. It was, in fact, a scene at the gates of Peking, the avenue leading to the tombs of the Ming emperors. Then one fine day, here I was. It's not very often that one can step into a picture belonging to one's childhood. Yet here I am on this Ming Avenue with the Ming camels like trussed chickens in their immobility, the Ming warriors, those unknown soldiers, the horses, the life-size Ming elephants, all sorts of animals 2 by 2 placed there to guide the traveler with no possibility of error to the precise spot where in fact the Ming emperors are not buried. Where they're buried, that's their own affair. A triumphal arch on a road leading nowhere that might well be the symbol of China. It's dawn. The gates of Peking are still draped in mist, as if the whole city were just coming out of a steam bath. The secret of the tombs was one form of Chinese politeness. The mist is perhaps another. This filmy veil that comes between people that prevents them from touching each other or staring at each other, this city at the bottom of the sea, this dusty light midway between water and silk, all this is still politeness, but it is already a form of painting. No, this is not an absent-minded surgeon. It's a townsman protecting himself against the dust until there are brick buildings and barriers to take over the job. For the revolution was directed against the capitalists, but also against dust, disease, and flies. The result is that one still finds capitalists in China, but there are no more flies. And on its way to a future without capitalists, disease, and flies, here is the China of tomorrow, the China which gives me a cheerful greeting. In the park where the China of tomorrow has led me, a Pekingese of today is doing his physical exercise. Here, the traditional sword takes the place of the Western dumbbells. The sword calls for more skill than the dumbbells, for with the same movement of the wrist, you have to whirl both something heavy, the sword, and something light, the silk tassel with its pom-poms. After proving his skill in this stylized violence, the Pekingese of today engages in a boxing match with one of his friends. The spectators tell me that this is Chinese boxing. One rarely hits or is hit. The whole skill lies in knowing when and how to dodge or to come to grips. When I ask who these energetic over-40s are, I am told quite simply that they're patients from a local hospital for whom physical exercise has been prescribed. Peihai, the northern lake, the ancient winter palace of the emperors. Here I again find my children of the mist. They look half squirrel and half apple. Their appearance is so charmingly traditional that one has to make an effort to remember that 25 years ago, amidst the filth of the Peking streets, every morning, one found little red bundles, children that had died in the night. That was the time when our parents saved their tinfoil wrappers of the chocolate bars for the children in China. I can't delude myself into believing that our silver paper was of much help. But after all, for a Western conscience, there is something satisfying in the thought that one at least of these young athletes, lean as cats, may owe his existence to our mother's chocolate. "10 o'clock, a Ming steamroller, unless it's just a copy, is leveling one of the walks of the Winter Palace. It's time to take a pedicab. those contraptions that have replaced the rickshaw and mingled with the hustle of the Chinese town. The Chinese town, that is to say, the suburb that more or less escaped the geometrical planning imposed by the Mongol conquerors. With its streamers, its signboards, and all the paraphernalia of incomprehensible publicity, this is the China of the movies. You'd expect to see Humphrey Bogart in a white suit coming out of an opium den, but there are no more opium dens, and lovers of the picturesque can always turn back to those fragments of old China that the flow of modern life still carries along with it. The price of modernism does not seem so high when we see the harsh price of the picturesque. For instance, this woman with deformed feet, a survival of the days of the Empire. Through Taitsing Men, the gate of purity, we move from one city to another, from the Chinese town to the Tartar town. This is regularly arranged in squares enclosing the imperial palace. It's less commercial than the Chinese city, though its outer avenues are in permanent use as a market, and beyond these there is a third city, the town that is being built, the Peking of 2000 AD. With the labor of mule and man, it is arising, a Peking which fortunately does not owe much to European forms of architecture. It is a Peking where the blend of tradition and novelty is symbolized by the presence at the top of modern buildings of something like hereditary mannerism, the four upturned corners of a Tartar tent. It is in this model district that we've come to see a model school with its model little girls who are playing or doing practical work in the fresh air. A class in the open air, a class to delight Giraudoux, where retorts and blast furnaces become the most delightful things in the world, and where meteorology is studied side by side with crochet work. I'm ashamed to confess that I interrupted the march of history for a moment, and by showing the class a picture book from France, caused general confusion. But the book is written in French, and the sight of all of these queer symbols gives the young Chinese, I'm told, all the thrills of the exotic. "11 o'clock. I've moved to another district, and here I am at the Bridge of Heaven. It used to be a criminal area. It's remained a little oasis of unorganized activity. It used to be the Court of Miracles. Now it's a fair." Midday and back in the street again. The policeman does not blow a whistle. That would not be polite. He addresses pedestrians and cyclists in terms that, though vigorous, are always grammatically correct. The children's bus which takes youngsters to school or to the park. And all along the streets, the permanent exhibit of the treasures of Peking. From the penny toys they sell on the pavements to the shops covered with characters as if they were huge boxes of tea. It is a feast of color. There is color everywhere, on the walls, on the fruit, on the pastry shops, and on the children's toys, on the musical instruments they're selling in the open air, on the theatrical costumes, on the sweetmeats, on the cheap porcelain in the market, and on the precious porcelain in Liu Li Shan, the street of the antique dealers, on roofs as well. And the whole town is a display stand for ancient China, with its temples, with its bronze animals, and its porcelain roofs. This is no longer the China of the movies. It's the China of Jules Verne's, of Marco Polo, and in this forbidden city, the golden center where the old imperial spider wove her web, in this forbidden city, now a museum close to this still white Peking cathedral, threatened symbolically by the horns of pagodas, one's imagination is caught up in history. One dreams of a fabulous China with a past more remote than the concealed faces of the moon, revealed only by the roosters crowing in the night and the she-lions staring at the sun. One thinks of the troops of Genghis Khan penetrating the passes of the mountain edged by the Great Wall, that masterpiece of the Chinese emperors, a Maginot Line 1,600 miles long and just about as useless. The horsemen descending on the plains and giving it over to their Tartar steeds, the Tartar steeds with soulful eyes like those of girls. The ancient Peking destroyed and transformed into a Mongol sub-district. the grandson of the conqueror Kublai Khan, rebuilding the capital and imposing upon it an order that would endure for 7 centuries, and sowing in his palaces a blue flower that grows only in Mongolia to assuage the homesickness of his troops, and the weariness of the conquerors, their inability to impose order on this vast mass, and the beginning of an era of legendary wars that still resound through the Peking Opera House today. The whole history of China, the truly historical and the legendary, lives again in the theater and in the marionettes. There is Swen Wukong, king of the monkeys and thief who robbed heaven, half Prometheus and half Charlie Chaplin. There are the gods, bearing sledgehammers and thunderbolts. There are the monsters, tigers, dragons, who come and take food from a girl's hand and respond to her caresses. There are the courtesans who died of love, the girls of noble family who married gardeners, and the generals, ancestors of all those generals who for 2,000 years made and destroyed China until 1st of October, the Chinese people celebrated their Bastille Day, their day of revolution. Let us say no more about history. In the gardens during the afternoon, history goes on. So long shut away behind its symbols, China is now called upon to reveal itself, and we are required to understand these sensitive faces, these men, these women, these children, with whom we shall have to share history as we shall have to share our daily bread. This crowd, so truly human, delights in being face to face with animals. The zoo in Peking is full of visitors. Here is this crowd like a broad blue river with its pairs of lovers chatting tenderly about the 5-year plan. Here is this crowd which bears you along like a mighty ocean. No amount of exasperation or pushing will carry you against it. Around this bear, children are dancing to a little tune that will stay with me until the end of the afternoon. We end our Sunday at the Summer Palace. The pioneers have taken possession of the islands. Their laughter and their songs are like birds in the silence. All this is as remote as China and as familiar as Hyde Park. Against this background of past splendor, in the avenues of this Mongol Versailles, one wonders about both past and future. But for my part, as I look at these scenes and take them in and listen to them, I just wonder at the close of this Sabbath day in Peking whether China itself is not the Sabbath of the whole world.